Everything in this universe has a beginning. The Big Bang. The formation of nebular matter into stars and planets. The first collections of amino acids in the Earth's oceans. The first creatures to leave them. The first mammals. The first primates that walked upright. The first religion. The first printing press.
Pump up your space boots and phone home. It's time for Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Live to tape from the mountains of West Virginia, it's Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Bigfoot, UFOs, Stargates, Let's Find Out, paranormal, intelligent design, entertainment. Let's find out. You're listening to Let's Find Out with co-host Diego.
Live to tape from the mountains of West Virginia. Welcome to another episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, since around the age of 12, our guest has been very interested in the history of Bigfoot. With his research and centuries worth of eyewitness accounts, his goal is to dig up and share these fascinating stories with us. Over the years, he has been intensifying his research and recently started the Sasquatch Discovery Project on YouTube, where he has a no-nonsense approach to the ape versus human theory on Bigfoot. Not only that, he also has a podcast focusing on another passion of his, classic rock. What's not to love about that? We'll be covering all of this plus more. Please welcome the founder of the Sasquatch Discovery Project, Jeremy Frank. Jeremy, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Diego, for having me. And I got excited when you talked about Bigfoot and classic rock all in the same sentence. I love that. Two of my favorite topics. I love it.
The planets are aligned. We're going to have a good time tonight. And on the pre-show, we were discussing some our love of the subjects and also classic rock, which we'll definitely cover later on. So your story sounds a lot like mine, as we discussed earlier, on the topic of Bigfoot at right around the young age, where we read the books, and probably you were watching In Search of with Leonard Nimoy as well as I was.
Totally.
I was, to use that term, the rabbit hole. I haven't been out since. With your passion on this subject, I know you got started at a young age, but what was it that really got you into it? Is there that the like the Oprah says, the aha moment to where you're saying this is it, this is the right thing for me?
I don't know that there's an aha moment. If there was one, first of all, I live in the Pacific Northwest. I live in Washington State, which is kind of considered ground zero for Bigfoot stuff, right? So it was always kind of in the orbit, living where I lived. You'd hear people talk about it. Down the road from where I live, there's a place called the Bigfoot Tavern that's been there as long as I can remember, that literally has, I should send you a picture, Diego. On the top, there's a giant Bigfoot feet, and it's just been part of the culture as long as I can remember. And I was always interested in that. In this whole time, my folks grew up in Western Montana, and we would be back and forth, even as we moved around to other parts. I was an Army brat, so kind of moved around, but we'd always kind of gravitate back to Montana for vacations or whatever, and very rural. I mean, literally in the middle of the mountains. And I can remember probably, I was probably 6 years old. So I was just little. So you have to kind of temper all this with the fact that it was a 6-year-old, right? But I can remember as a 6-year-old, we were at my uncle's house for Thanksgiving, again, in the middle of the mountains. And we went for a drive. We decided we were going to go on a drive, and we all, as many of us could, piled into a big Suburban, and we're driving up this Forest Service road up a mountain, and there's about an inch of snow on the ground. I remember. And I remember sitting on the window seat. I was in the window seat, and I'm just kind of looking out at the ground, and I saw footprints walking along the road, like barefoot human footprints. And I don't remember them being big. I mean, to me, they just look like normal, man-sized footprints. So they didn't strike me as really big, but I remember thinking, oh, there's footprints out there. And I even said, there's footprints out there, like barefooted. Someone barefooted was walking here. And my uncle and all the adults are kind of, oh no, it'd be too cold for someone to be walking. It's probably something, they didn't even stop and look or whatever. And I was 6 and I'm like, oh well. But that's a clear memory that I have of, if I was a little older, it probably would have been a bigger deal to me, because, you wouldn't see barefooted footprints out in the snow. But I don't know if that's an aha moment, but that's the earliest memory I have of really thinking about it. And then just like you mentioned earlier, Diego, that we probably around 10 or 12, the library at school might have a book on Bigfoot or Sasquatch or the Loch Ness Monster or whatever. And of course, I was always ate up any of those, anything, whether it was In Search Of that you mentioned, or remember the show That's Incredible?
I do.
There would be like a segment on Bigfoot or something on that show or something. Anytime there was an opportunity to watch something or read something about it, I would. And of course, that was all fueled by the fact that, I would spend a lot of time out in the woods in areas where, this type of stuff happened. Right. And I've never been in the woods and seen them or anything other than those footprints, but it's just been a part of something I've been interested in as long as I can remember.
And those are the moments that last a lifetime. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because for the listeners who've heard my story in the past, I've lived a very haunted or a lot of experience with the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
And when you know things, because it's almost life changing.
Right.
And we talking about that because the mission behind the Sasquatch Discovery Project is to, of course, talk about the evidence. But before I get to it, because I was very surprised of who influenced you to start this channel in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a few influences, but are you referring to the Dave Politis? That
I
influence?
am, but I've always butchered his last name, so
Yeah,
I was trying
so I was thinking I have a couple influences, but yeah, he's one. And here's the thing about, I want to come back to one thing you said really quick, Diego, because I think that's key. You said, when you know. And so often people come from it at an angle that they feel like they have to prove it. And you are probably in this place where you're like, you don't have to prove anything because right?
exactly.
The thing about Dave Politis, and for those that aren't aware of Dave Politis, he's the missing 411 guy. He was a police officer in California, and he was asked or hired by a group of people to actually, I think that the idea was, prove if Bigfoot is real or not. We'll give you funding, we'll help you with the research, we'll give you whatever resources you need. We just want to know, is this real or not? Well, and that began his, so up until that point, he didn't really have an opinion on Bigfoot. He didn't really care, right? But that began his personal, trip down the rabbit hole. And one of the things that he found, and this is what inspired me, is he started to look at the history, right? Because I think, at least in popular culture, Bigfoot didn't really spring into the zeitgeist until like the 60s, right? And if you notice on a newscast, whenever there's a story about Bigfoot, how do they treat it? They treat it like it's a joke. Same with UFO stuff,
Yes,
right?
They play the X-Files music.
Yeah,
I hate that.
Totally. Well, finally, before we go tonight, people in Texas think they might have seen Bigfoot, right? And then they show some redneck who's missing all his teeth talking about, yeah, I've seen him right at, they make it a total joke, right?
Right.
Well, and this is what I appreciated about Dave. Dave Paulides is an investigator, right? He handles it like an investigator. And he starts digging up newspaper accounts from the 1600s and 1700s, back so long ago that the S's are written like F's. And when you try and read those old articles, it's really hard because every S looks like an F. But these stories of, and what did they call them? They called them wild men. They called them, various names for these. And of course, the Native American tribes, and I say Native American, any indigenous tribe in the world has some sort of oral history about these type of creatures for hundreds of years, right? And so it makes me mad. I mean, it's just when they make it a joke, they treat it like a joke, and they just completely discount 400 years of eyewitness accounts of these types of creatures, not just in North America, in Alaska, in China, in Europe. And so I'm like, who are we? Who are we arrogant modern day folks to think that we're the ones that decide whether or not this is real or not? And I come back just to what you said. When you know what you know, when you know. And so for people who've had experiences, and too many people that I respect have seen things, for me to just say, oh no, you saw a bear. No, people know the difference between a bear. So it's kind of an insult, right? When you see the expert, you see some expert on one of these Bigfoot shows who looks like a 24-year-old kid fresh out of college who's telling you, no, it was not it was a bear. No, it wasn't. You weren't there. You don't know, right? So, and that's kind of what I like to focus on the YouTube, and it's brand new too. It's only been up for about a month or so. But what I do is I share these historical accounts. I'll go back and I'll find from 1840 an account. It was before we called them Bigfoot, but they might be referred to as a wild man, as a giant, as a Sasquatch, right? Or some Native American term. And the commonalities are uncanny, right? They're usually 7 to 8 feet tall. They're covered with hair. And in the 1800s, there are Native American accounts where they refer to the Sasquatch as a tribe. And nowhere, I shouldn't say nowhere, very rarely are they referred to as an ape. It's usually more likely they'll be called a wild man or some type of people. And some of these coastal tribes in Oregon, for example, they refer to the Sasquatch as a tribe and said that they would trade with them and that they were large, they were covered with hair. And there's no surprise. I mean, if you were to go and talk to indigenous peoples in Alaska about Sasquatch, they'd be like, well, of course they exist. Yeah, I mean, they've been here for hundreds of years. We see them out on whatever island, or we hear them, or you hear us, oh, that's a Sasquatch. It's not even up for debate. So there's frustration for me when I see the so-called experts who are questioning that whether or not these actually, well, yeah, they exist. That's why people have been talking about them for 500 years. All you got to do is look at the history.
Right, and that's exactly what I was going to talk about next, because one of the last ones I saw was a wild man of France. It was from a newspaper article back in 1899.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in those times in the 1800s, even the early 1900s, these types of reports were very common.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to the Native Americans, and touching what you said earlier, where people say, well, you saw a bear, or it could have been an ape, or a large dog, or whatever they want to describe it as.
Mm-hmm.
Why would we not believe Native Americans who were here first and would know better than anybody else the difference between an animal and a human? Because you
Yeah.
don't trade with animals. You don't
Right.
talk. You talk to animals, kind of,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you don't really talk to an animal when it comes to trade or learning how they speak, or even because they must have had some sort of culture.
Mm, exactly.
So
Yes.
in those times, in your opinion, even before the Europeans set foot on this continent, what do you think their numbers were back then? Because it had to have been numerous amounts of them.
Well, yeah, and that's a great question. And here's something too that Diego, I'm sure you've flown, you've been on an airplane, right?
Yes, sir.
And all you've got to do is fly from coast to coast, right? And you realize even in this modern day, most of what you fly over is uninhabited, especially away from the East Coast. Uh, at night, especially when you fly and you see where the lights aren't, you know, just in the continental US, once you get, off the eastern seaboard, for the most part, most of the land is pretty wide open, right? And then you go to the western US, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. I mean, there are fewer people in the entire state of Montana than there are, I think, in Rhode Island, which is a tiny little state, right? So
Yes.
when you think about how rural much of the West is, and then 90% of Canada's population is within about 20 miles of the US border. Think about that. 90% of Canada's population is within, you know, 30 minutes of the US border, which means everything north of Canada is literally wide open. Alaska, the same way. So there's the potential. There could be a million of them. I don't know. I have no idea. But there's definitely enough land to support a lot of them, right? And if you're talking about a creature that is intelligent, okay, so think about a bear or a mountain lion. They don't they don't hide. They'll conceal themselves when they're sneaking up to eat you, right? But they are not going to stand behind a tree and peek at you, right? A bear won't do that. This creature, Sasquatch, these forest people, whatever you want to call them, they are smart enough to stay hidden, right? And if they don't want to be seen, they probably won't be seen. And I think the times we do see them are either they want us to see them, or we might get lucky. We walk around the bend just as one is crossing a road or something, right? So and there, those are the common things, right, Diego? You hear that all that times. So like, why have we never found a body of one? Why don't we ever find a skeleton of one? Why don't we, so lots of questions like that. And the fact of the matter is, depending on who you talk to, some people will say we have found bodies of them. Some people will say, oh, and here's the one I like, why are the pictures always fuzzy and blurry? Well, the pictures you've seen are always fuzzy and blurry, but there are some videos on YouTube right now that are pretty dang compelling. You ever watch Thinker Thunker? Diego, have you
I
ever watched Thinker
I have
Thunker?
not.
So Thinker Thunker is a guy on YouTube who's he's a nerd. I mean, and he admits it, he's a nerd. He's a very techie guy. He analyzes footage of Bigfoot, and he uses software analyzes to figure out the proportions of the arms and the legs. He'll take the Patterson film, Patterson film is the gold seal video evidence. It's real.
It's the
Okay?
Roswell of Bigfoot.
It's the Roswell of Bigfoot. There's no way in 1967 that these two retired rodeo cowboys could have made a suit that does what that suit does. And people have since even reached out to special effects people in Disney studios and says, what would it take to make the Patty suit, the suit? And they're like, well, I'm not sure we could, because you watch that video, you see muscles, the musculature, you see muscles moving underneath it. And here's where Thinker Thunker comes in, and he measures the length of the arms to the legs, and the whole face thing. If you look at the human face, the distance from your nose to your eyes, and then from your eyes to the middle of your mouth, it's pretty much the same on every human being, right? Your eyes in relation to your ear, where your ears are positioned on your head. It's all, regardless of your race or whatever, ethnicity, all humans are pretty much the same. So what he's done is he's taken that Patty video, the Patterson film, he's looked at the face, matched up all the proportions on the face, done the same with the arms and the legs. And now you've got a template. You've got a measuring stick that you can measure to any other purported Bigfoot sighting, right? And he exposes more phonies than he does real ones. But for instance, here's an easy way to tell. If you watch any of these videos that people say, hey, here's Sasquatch. I can't remember the exact figures. On a Sasquatch, their arms and legs are about the same length. Okay. So if you measure, from shoulder to elbow, elbow to wrist, and then measure from the top of the hip to the knee down to the ankle, on a Sasquatch, that's the same length. On a human, it's about 20%. The arms are 20% shorter than the legs. Okay. So now that you have that ratio, an ape, the arms are slightly longer than the legs. So now that you have that ratio, if you see what looks like purports to be Bigfoot and their arms are 20% shorter than their legs, guess what? It ain't a Bigfoot. That's a guy in a suit, right? If you see them where the arms and the legs are about the same length, it could very well be a Sasquatch. And face, the same thing. If you're in a situation where you can actually get, now, unfortunately, there are very few films with face other than the Patterson film face, but its ratios are different than a human's are. So if you measure it and run the same check and it lines up with that of a human, well, then that's probably not a Sasquatch, right? But, and I don't remember where I was going to. Oh, my point is, there's quite a bit of evidence out there. But again, a lot of the skeptics, until you have a Sasquatch dead on a table somewhere, they're still not going to accept it, I think, in my mind.
And I believe that's very true. If there is evidence out there with the bones, or let's say, for a lack of better words, let's say a taxidermist found one and stuffed it and put it somewhere, it's, in my opinion, most like any other bones discovered of giants, where either wind up in a very rich person's personal collection, or they're quote unquote buried somewhere in a vault in some sort of government-run museum, which you'll never see again.
Yep. Remember the scene at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark?
You're reading my mind.
Absolutely. When they're sliding the Ark of the Covenant away in that big warehouse. So you mentioned the giants, and throughout the Midwest, the mounds, there are so many places where giant skeletons, 9-foot skeletons, 6 toes, right? The whole 6-toed, the skeletons with 6 toes and 6 fingers, the skulls with double rows of teeth, right? There are so many accounts, and you can go back and read the newspaper articles from the early 1900s where giant skeletons discovered in Arizona. the Smithsonian will be coming to, well, once the Smithsonian gets, you're never going to see them again.
It's over now.
It's over. And so, yes, and here's where I sound like a conspiracy guy, right? But for whatever reason, once it goes to the Smithsonian, you ain't going to see it again, right? And who knows what they might have, right? And there have been lots of stories of people that have claimed to have shot a Sasquatch or found one, and then, to your point, someone from the government shows up, and that's the end of the story.
Could be the end of you too if you're not careful.
That's right. I better be careful. Yeah.
Yeah, and touching on something you said earlier, because I know that why are always the pictures fuzzy or out of focus? Why is the camera shaky? Well, let's talk about in today's society, we're accustomed to having cameras everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it has unfortunately become very common to where people act terribly in public. There's usually their fights or things like that get caught on camera. A lot of people have their phones; they're almost waiting for things to happen,
Right.
just to put them on YouTube, become famous, or make merchant of that type of video. Okay, let me talk about myself. If I were out there hiking in the woods, something pops up. Let's say it could be I'll say a bear, a wolf. It could be a Bigfoot. It's going to scare the crap out of me.
Totally.
And the seconds it takes me to take out a phone, unlock it, put my code in it, choose the camera mode, take a picture, and my hands are shaking, the thing's already running, you're not going to capture the thing sitting there and wait, hey, you going to take my picture or not? It's just going to be super fast.
I agree.
So if we're waiting, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but if we're waiting for that perfect picture to happen, unless you're in a tree for weeks at a time and you're accidentally catch one, yeah, it's going to be blurry.
Yeah. Yep. And that's the flip side of that is important to note too. If you happen to see what purports to be a Bigfoot footage where you've got a perfect camera setup, and then this Bigfoot just happens to walk on scene, and that's probably fake, right? Because it's exactly like you said, is you're going to be surprised when you see him. You're not going to be able to, you're going to be scared. And oftentimes, here's the thing, and here's the whole psychological part or paranormal or I don't know the word I'm searching for here, is one of the common themes that happens that you hear about is people have a feeling of dread or fear oftentimes before they see one of these creatures. So they'll be walking along, and they call it like mind speak, right? And they'll almost hear a voice that says, turn around and leave. You need to go now, right? So they'll feel this sense of dread or danger or fear before they see it. And so that's kind of the whole, and to be honest, that's the part that makes a lot of researchers uncomfortable, is they don't want to admit the psychic part. But even the early accounts, a lot of the Native American accounts would talk about how Sasquatches were shapeshifters, or they could read your mind, or they could disappear into a tree. So all of this stuff, which it's easy for us in the modern day to just dismiss and say, well, that's crazy, that doesn't happen, right? There's a reason that stuff's been written about for hundreds of years. And I don't have the answer. I don't know what that is, what the whole paranormal aspect is, but that's a common thread, right? That the Bigfoots could read my mind, or you'll hear stories of people that they are terrorized by one, and so they move, and then guess what? They get to the new place and they're terrorizing them at the new place. So kind of crazy stuff. And it kind of goes back and forth, Diego, from being they're a malevolent, scary creature to they're wonderful, loving creatures that want to be peaceful. So the way I think about it is, if these are people, right? If these are people and not apes, which I tend to think they're people, if they're people, they're going to be just like we are. There are good people There are bad people. There are people that are dangerous, people that would help you. I think it's probably the same situation.
And I tend to agree with you because if we're going to go into them being tribes of humans of sorts,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just like in I don't want to upset anybody when I say this, just like tribes of Native Americans
Mm-hmm.
back then, you had some tribes that would work with you, and you had some tribes that were warlike, not only towards the settlers but towards each other. So it
Absolutely.
makes perfect sense to have different types of these Sasquatch, Bigfoot, all across the globe. Well, they're not all going to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
Just like humans, it's impossible for us all to be the same.
Yeah, even dogs, right?
Yes,
Dogs have different temperaments. Some dogs are just more naturally, and I mean even within the same breed. One dog might be more aggressive and mean. Another dog might be more docile and gentle. I mean, it's the same thing. And another thing that's interesting, so you look in the South, the skunk ape, right? They're probably different kind of subspecies, they're because they're in some parts of the world, in Australia, right, they're not necessarily tall, right, they might be 4 or 5 feet tall, but it's the same hairy wild man type scenario, and I always come back to most of the world, most of the square footage, most of the square acreage on the earth, if you look at it, is uninhabited, right? There is lots of territory for all kinds of creatures to roam and live.
true. Because it wasn't until when I wish I knew the dates where gorillas were thought to be mythical creatures that don't
Yeah.
exist until they discovered them.
I think it was in the early 1900s. So it's
Yes,
only been about the last 100 years that we even believed that gorillas were real. Yeah, that's a very good point. Very good point.
and now we see a lot more footage of them. We have them in zoos, things like that. So I'll ask you, what's the harm in knowing these things exist? Because I know there's a lot about fear, because maybe people will start questioning their reality or their religion,
Mhm.
or does their life have any more purpose? But I don't think all those things should happen. I mean, if it's real, why not? So what?
I agree with you. And I don't know if with Sasquatch it's at the same level as like UFOs, right? Because I know that's one of the things they'll say about UFOs as well. We don't, if we admit that UFOs are real, then how will that challenge? I'm religious. I'm a Christian. I don't have I don't have a problem with UFOs. I mean, if because I believe that they are real. I believe Sasquatch is real. I don't feel that that changes a thing about my religious beliefs personally, but that's kind of the fear that some people think is that if we're governments are about control, right? And if they admit that there's something that they don't control, then that's a threat to their control. And I think that's part of it. And yeah, there's that whole. And see, I'm not sure about some of these things. Like there in one corner, you got the Scott Carpenter types who think that Bigfoot is the Nephilim that we read about in the Old Testament. I see. I don't know that I'm willing to go there. I'm not saying he's wrong, but I don't need to go that far to accept that they're real and that they exist. For me, it's enough just to say, hey, there's a group of people that live in the wilderness,
Yeah,
and I'm okay with that. Now, but I sometimes struggle too with some of the psychic, the mind speak, the teleportation, the shape shifting, and all. I don't know about all that, but I will say it's been talked about for hundreds of years, right? And we have this arrogance. We always tend to think that we're smarter than everyone that's lived before us and all of that stuff, and we just kind of discount the indigenous accounts, which I think is a mistake, because you said it earlier. People that live in the wilderness, they're going to know a lot more about what's going on than some guy in a college, laboratory somewhere. Even if he's got degrees, that doesn't mean jack, right? Um, Compared to an Inuit in Alaska who's lived out in the wilderness his whole life, he could tell you a lot more about Sasquatch than Dr. Jeff Meldrum. And I like Jeff Meldrum, actually. He's one of the good guys, I think. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think it hurts anything if we admit that these are real. That's my point.
No, and what you're saying is true, because now I've noticed that I'm gonna say in the last almost 10 years, where you have people out there like a L.A. Marzulli or a Stephen Quayle, where
Mhm.
now they're going into the churches and say, "Not so fast. Have you not read the accounts of the people in the
Yeah,
Old Testament,
yeah,
where they're now not mentioned specifically by today's terms, but if you really want to be honest with yourself and be open minded, there where there's smoke, there's fire. I think it's now, I say the church. No, I don't know, however you want to say it, but it's becoming more common now, where those ideas are more accepted instead of saying heretic, get out of this building.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and Steve Quayle. I'm glad you mentioned Steve Quayle. He's all these guys. Steve Quayle's in Montana. Dave Politis is in Montana. A lot of these guys are not far from me. Steve Quayle's another guy that I really listen to a lot. I haven't lately, but the whole Giants, you know, talking about Operation Paperclip and all these crazy stuff, or High Jump. Was it High Jump where they went to Antarctica? Was that Operation High Jump? That might have been High Jump.
Yes, because I
Uh,
believe that there's something. Was there something to do with nothing to do with Emerald Bird? But I'm saying I
there,
believe, yeah,
yeah. So I get my operations. Paperclip was when they brought all the Nazis. People don't know
yeah,
this, but our space program was basically founded and run by scientists that we brought over from Nazi Germany, who helped. I'm not saying they were all Nazis. They didn't really have a choice. The Nazis made them work on the rocket program, but
yeah.
those were all people that came over, and that was the beginning of our space program. Were these scientists from Germany? Um, but Steve Quayle had some very interesting things about giants, right? So it's been part of our record forever, for as long as we've had history, and Genesis 6 talks about the giants being, I'm paraphrasing, but giants so big that it made the men look like grasshoppers, right?
Yes.
A big giant, right? So we've got this history of things, and in our current world, everything's got to fit in its little box. It's got to be just like what we think it is, and you get outside of that, and that challenges people, right? And some people aren't comfortable with that. And Steve Quayle, he will challenge you because you'll listen to him on one topic and you go, man, this guy's really smart. He really knows what he's talking about, really smart. And then he'll talk about something else and he's still the same guy who's super smart, but it's so far out, you're like, huh? No way. So it's like you said, you've really got to come with an open mind, you know. I like the How to Hunt guy, Steve Istall, right? Steve Istall has a channel. It started out as a hunting channel, but it's basically turned into a channel where all he talks about is Bigfoot. And people will send in their accounts, their stories with Bigfoot. And I like to listen to it. And I'm just going to be honest, Diego, as I listen to it, I think 50% of the emails that get sent in are total BS, because they don't, you can tell, right? You can
Hmm.
tell if things ring true or if it just sounds like BS. But you know what? Even if 90% of it's BS, that means 10% of that stuff is real. And that's a lot. That's a lot of people who are having encounters with these, and they're from all over. It's not just in Washington State or Northern California or British Columbia. It's in Oklahoma. It's in Arkansas. It's in Ohio. It's in West Virginia, right?
Oh yeah, we have a lot of them here. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So it's all over. And uh, you can't tell me, some college professor can't tell me that all of those people who've grown up in the woods don't know what they're seeing. Because it's just like what you said, when you know, you know. And you can't take that away from people. You know, just because you say I saw a bear doesn't mean I saw a bear. I know what I saw, right?
Right. And we don't have to prove anything to anybody. You know,
Right.
you'll once you see it, come talk to me.
Exactly. Because when they do see it, they'll be dancing a different tune. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I guess they'll be singing a different tune, I guess is what they'll be doing. Yeah.
And then they'll be upset that people don't believe them. So how's that feel?
Now, how do you feel? Yeah, exactly.
so so with your rather young YouTube channel, what stories are coming up next? What do you got coming up?
Oh, you know, to be honest, I actually had hoped to have one up today. I just had so much going on, I wasn't able to. You know, I've kind of been in the early 1800s, and I've got a few websites. I've been doing my own little research. There's I can't remember what it's called right now. Uh, it's even set up as a bookmark in my thing. Anyway, I can't find it, but there's a website which is an archive of one of the so like a Tacoma, Washington Public Library online archive that has a big section on Sasquatch and Bigfoot. And so what I can do is kind of scroll through there and just find different accounts. They have a lot of kind of from like in the 40s and 50s type things. But then as I'm going back, I'm finding more and more from the 1800s. And I don't really, for the most part, I don't add my opinion to it. All I do is I read the newspaper article. So it's just a historical thing. So I have one on the wild man of France. I have a couple from Texas. I've only got like 6 or 7 videos up. So it's new, right? Uh, but please check it out. It's just Sasquatch Discovery Project on YouTube, if you check that out. But that's really my focus, is its historical accounts. All these are newspaper articles from around the world from the last 300 years that talk about these. And some are super far-fetched, right? And you can tell, well, that's kind of the writing style back then. It was kind of sensational, you know, the sensational style. But others aren't so much. Others are pretty straightforward, you know, and they'll talk about women being kidnapped, hauled off, carried out into the woods, children, you know, being kidnapped. There's just a whole broad cross section of accounts from all over the world. Again, those aren't all people making things up, right? So that, again, that's why it frustrates me when they treat it like a joke, you know, in the newscast. Oh, this guy thought he saw, and it's really insulting when you think about it, you know, especially to these indigenous peoples that this has been a part of their record for forever, and we just discount it all and say, oh no, it's all made up. You know, who am I to say, sitting in my you know, college laboratory, what's made up or not? You know, because, and I keep coming back to what you said, if you know, you know.
100% true. And with reading those articles before we go, can you think of one of those that really stuck out to you the most, or like, wow, this is I wish I were there to investigate this?
One of the interesting ones is there was, I don't have the dates, and I don't have it right in front of me, but back in the late 1800s, there is an account of one that was in captivity. They had a Sasquatch in a cage, and I think they called him a wild man, and he was like 5 feet tall. So I don't know if he was a young or just a smaller species, but this was a hair covered guy. The accounts I've read, he could kind of talk a little bit. So there was a little speech there. Super strong, like stories of him with one hand, you know, twisting a guy's I think he broke a guy's wrist or something who reached into the cage, and just for his size was extremely strong. There was a train wreck. They were transporting him, and there was a train wreck, and it busted open his cage, and he escaped. But it was in captivity for a number of years, and there are lots of stories like that. So when people say, why haven't we ever found one? Why haven't we ever captured one? Well, in fact, we have, right? And why haven't we found skeletons? Well, we probably have. And then they wind up in that big vault you talked about in some government warehouse.
Yeah.
Think of all the mound builders, right? Where did all those skeletons go that they found? Most of those have been spirited away to someplace.
Right. And even if they die in the woods, I mean, eventually the earth is going to reclaim what it's theirs.
If you come across a dead elk, okay, so like where I live at my place in Montana, I have a place 115 miles to the east of here, which is in western Montana. And it's not uncommon to find a dead deer, dead elk. You find a dead elk. If I found an elk tomorrow, okay, within a week or two, it's stripped completely clean. All it would be is the bones. If I came back a year later, I'd probably still find a few bones. But within 2 years, there's going to be no sign of there ever being an elk there. So it does not take. And where do people go? People stay right on the roads or close to the road. If you get out in the woods, you'd probably find all kinds of stuff, but people aren't out there. That's why we don't find them.
So, nobody's going to go out there. Nobody who's, if you're an inexperienced person, I don't go out there.
Right.
So before we go, let's talk about something we touched upon right before the show. Let's talk about your classic rock show, because I'm looking at your Twitter. You quite a following.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you. I mean, what's better than Bigfoot and classic rock?
Nothing.
Can you think of anything? Yeah, so I started a YouTube channel, classic rock YouTube channel on Valentine's Day in 2014, I think is when I started it. And the YouTube channel I've got about 16,000 followers, so I haven't really been working on it too hard. I started the podcast in the end of 2020, I think. I wish I would have started it 5 years earlier when I first thought about it, but I didn't. But anyways, the podcast is called Classic Guitar Rock. So on Twitter, that's at Classic Guitar R1. And thank you for letting me plug it, Diego. I appreciate it.
Of course.
You're a fan of classic rock. And what I call it, we celebrate the great guitar-driven rock of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So if that's in your wheelhouse, we talk about that a lot. And follow us on Twitter. We're up to about 35, almost 36,000 followers on Twitter. And the podcast is actually doing pretty well. So I wish I would have started it earlier. And I just recently started. I don't know that I'm going to do a podcast related to the Sasquatch just because you know how it is. It's time consuming to do a podcast. So I'm like, man, if I try to do another podcast, so at this point, I'm just doing YouTube for the Sasquatch Discovery Project. And it's a brand new channel. So check that out if you're interested. But the classic guitar rock podcast is kind of my bread and butter as far as the podcasting goes, because I have that's done pretty well over the last few years. So check that out too. So the most important question of all, talk about classic guitar rock. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you mine if you tell me yours. Okay. All right.
Out of that era, who is your favorite classic guitar rock player?
Are you talking specifically a guitar player?
Sure.
See, I could go an hour here. If you're going to pin me down, if I have to pick a favorite guitar player right now, and he's underrated, doesn't get the love he should, I would say Michael Schenker, who was in UFO, and then of course had the Michael Schenker group. Not as popular as an Eddie Van Halen or Richie Blackmore or someone like that, or Jimmy Page, but for my money, Michael Schenker's my favorite guitar player.
Fantastic choice. And normally I veer off more towards the heavy metal side, but I'm gonna go with one of the ones that I think has influenced a lot of heavy metal guitar players. And if they say they didn't, they're liars. Richie Blackmore.
Oh, Richie Blackmore's probably my second. He'd be my number two. And you're right. If a heavy metal guy says he didn't influence them, they are lying. Yeah.
That's right. Hey man, Jeremy, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show, and I urge the listeners to go to the Sasquatch Discovery Project and check it out on YouTube. I was on there for a good little while today, full of great facts and articles, and I really appreciate the work you put into it.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun. I would love to come on again, and I'll have you on sometime. You know what? I'm going to have you come on, and we'll do something on YouTube. We'll do that sometime. I think that'd be awesome.
Excellent. I would love to. I'd be honored to. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right. Thank you so much, Diego.
Thank you for being here. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with me, co-host Diego. Please check us out on all our social media pages, as well as our brand new YouTube channel. I'd like to thank our good friends Stan, Brian, and Big Rob over there at Corner to Corner Radio, one of the best pro wrestling podcasts of all space and time, for helping spread the word about this show. Please check them out at c2cradioshow.com. That's C, letter C, number 2, letter C, c2cradioshow.com, and tell them co-host Diego sent you. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Thank you for listening to Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. We're on Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Pocket Casts, and on Anchor. For more information about Let's Find Out with co-host Diego, please visit us on Facebook.com/co-host Diego, on Twitter at co-host_Diego, and on Instagram as co-host Diego. Copyright co-host Diego. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness. Available on Spotify, Anchor, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, YouTube, and iHeartRadio.